Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everybody who is joining us at this South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's an online event, obviously, and the foundation incorporates all three centres in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. And we are all three centres are delighted to welcome here for this very special commemoration. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Kluk, and I'm the director of the Durban Holocaust and Genocide Centre. And for those of you joining us now, welcome to the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation's commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's wonderful that I'm joined by the relatively new director of the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Centre, Jakub, or as he is known affectionately to us, Jakub Nowakowski. Tally Nates, who is the chairperson of the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation, is not able to join us. She's traveling in the United States and mainly to speak on this very special day of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. She has a number of speaking engagements, and between that and the time difference, Tally hasn't been able to join us. But we are delighted that most of her team are able to be here. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Vix. Vix Applebaum has been amazing in making sure. Love working with Vix. Her detail is just incredible. And we are all absolutely perfectly prepared. So anything that doesn't go according to plan has got nothing to do with Vix. We're going to begin the commemoration this evening with a recording of a beautiful musical interlude, a song recorded by Zola Shuman, who is the daughter of Gaiele Rosenthal. Gaiele Rosenthal and Xavier Piatka, Zola's parents, were both Holocaust survivors. And during the middle of last year, the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Centre created a magnificent exhibition in honor of Gaiele, detailing the story of Gaiele's life. And the exhibition subsequently has traveled to Johannesburg for a few months, and I'm very proud and pleased to say that we will open this exhibition next week in Durban. So we look forward to hearing Zola, a beautiful rendition of a Yiddish song that she actually wrote in honor of her parents and all their family lost. So after we've heard the music, we're going to hear the music, and then I'll continue to direct you through the program. Welcome, everybody.
Hört sich zu, wie wir singen, wie es klappen unsere Herzen, mit Rhythm von euer Leben, hört sich zu. Wir seien euer Kinder, wir singen euer Lieder, zu lieb euch wir seien da. We are here because of you. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Hört sich zu, we will remember you. You're with us everywhere we go. We hold you safely in our hearts. We'll share with future generations all the lessons of your past, all your suffering and losses, and the pain that you've been through will never be forgotten. Hört sich zu. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Herzlich zu, we will remember you. We have cried in all our tears the sadness of your darkest years, but the joy in your survival gives us life. Wir wollen euch keinmal nicht vergessen, wir wollen euch ständig gedenken. Auf ewig will wir singen zu lieb euch. Well, tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song with courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Herzlich zu, we will remember you. Herzlich zu, we will remember you.
Thank you, Zola, for that absolutely beautiful musical interlude. I'm now going to introduce, although Tally needs no introduction to our audience, but as I said to you, Tally is in the US delivering a speech on this auspicious occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day and is unable to join us. So Tally has prepared a pre-recorded message. Bex, we'd like to hear from Tally. Thank you.
My name is Tally Nates, and I'm the chair of the South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation, the association of the 3 centers in Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg, where I'm also the director of. With the alarming rise of anti-Semitism and hatred of those perceived as the other around the world, the work of the 3 centers in South Africa is more urgent and necessary than ever before. In today's 79th commemoration, we are marking the 27th of January 1945, the day that the Auschwitz complex of camps was liberated by the soldiers of the First Ukrainian Front of the Soviet Army. After the war, Auschwitz became a symbol of the Holocaust, and as such, that day of liberation, the 27th of January, was chosen in 2005 as the day when the world remembers the horrors of the Shoah. On the 18th of January 1945, the Nazis took tens of thousands of prisoners on a notorious death march towards Germany. Less than 8,000 remained behind in Auschwitz and liberated on the 27th of January 1945. And we need to look at the complexity before we understand the symbolism of Auschwitz. What was Auschwitz? Auschwitz was not just one single camp, but a vast complex comprising over 40 subcamps and 3 main camps: Auschwitz I, a concentration camp; Auschwitz II, Birkenau, a concentration and death camp; and Auschwitz III, Bunamonowitz, a forced labor camp. By the spring of 1943, the Nazis built 4 gas chambers with crematoria in Auschwitz-Birkenau. When trains arrived, SS doctors selected a small number, perhaps 15%, of deportees for forced labor. They were clothed in prisoner uniform, their hair was shaved, and prisoner numbers were tattooed on their arms. This was the only camp where tattooing happened. All the other deportees, mostly women, children, and the elderly, were ordered to undress, surrender their personal belongings, and then they were driven into the gas chambers where the Nazis murdered them with Cyclone B poison gas. The Sonderkommando, Jewish prisoners who were forced to work in the gas chambers and crematoria, removed the bodies, extracted gold teeth, and shaved the woman's hair before burning the corpses. The Nazis murdered approximately 1 million Jews, 75,000 Polish prisoners, 21,000 Sinti and Roma, 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war, and around 10,000 prisoners of other nationalities in Auschwitz. After the war, as I said, Auschwitz became the symbol of the Holocaust. However, the Nazis murdered the Jews in 5 other death camps: Chełmno, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, and Majdanek, as well as hundreds of other killing sites, such as Babi Yar, near Kiev, in today's Ukraine, Ponar, near Vilnius, in Lithuania, and so many more. Jews were murdered everywhere, in ghettos, in camps, shot by the Einsatzgruppen or gassed in the gas vans or death camps in occupied Poland. Our challenge is to remember and learn about Auschwitz, but also about all the complex history of the Holocaust. I'm grateful to our dear Holocaust survivors and their descendants, and to my colleagues Mary Kluk, Iris Singer, Jakub Nowakowski, and Adam Mendelsohn for helping us to do just that, today and every day.
Thank you, Tali. This evening we have some special messages. We're honored to have messages to share. The first from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. The second from His Excellency, Mr. Eli Bielotsikowski, Ambassador of Israel to South Africa. And the third from His Excellency, Mr. Andreas Peschke, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to South Africa.
Today, we pause to mourn the 6 million Jewish children, women and men systematically murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, and we grieve the Roma and Sinti, the people with disabilities, and so many others who were persecuted and killed in the Holocaust. We honor their memory. We stand with the survivors, their families and descendants. We pledge never to forget, nor let others forget the truth of what happened. And we recognize the horrific resonance this day of commemoration finds in our own times. The anti-Semitic hate that fueled the Holocaust did not start with the Nazis, nor did it end with their defeat. Today we are witnessing hate spreading at alarming speed. Online, it has moved from the margins to the mainstream. But today of all days we must remember that demonization of the other and disdain for diversity is a danger to everyone. That no society is immune to intolerance and worse, and that bigotry against one group is bigotry against all. As the former Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom, Jonathan Sacks, so memorably said, the hate that begins with Jews never ends with Jews. And so today, especially in the wake of the abhorrent 7 October terror attacks by Hamas, we must resolve to stand up against the forces of hate and division. We must condemn unequivocally, whenever and wherever we encounter anti-Semitism, just as we must condemn all forms of racism, prejudice and religious bigotry, including anti-Muslim hatred and violence against minority Christian communities. Let us never be silent in the face of discrimination and never tolerant of intolerance. Let us speak out for human rights and the dignity of all. Let us never lose sight of each other's humanity and never let down our guard. To all who confront prejudice and persecution, let us clearly say, you are not alone. The United Nations stands with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is indeed a pleasure to be with you here today and to mark the International Holocaust Memorial Day. This day was chosen by the United Nations 27th of January because on this day, the biggest death camp of the Nazi murder machine, Auschwitz-Birkenau, was liberated. When the war ended and the people in the world were exposed to the extent of this atrocity, of this unbelievable crime, people were shocked. And following the Nuremberg trials and the revelations of the final solution, what is called, and the attempt of the Nazis to destroy the Jewish people as an ethnic group, Raphael Lemkin, a historian, has coined the term genocide. And in 1948, a convention, a genocide convention, was drafted in order to create a legal infrastructure to prevent such things from happening again. Yesterday, I was watching the news, and one of the items on the news was an interview with an oldish lady who was a Holocaust survivor. She was a very small child when the Holocaust took place, and she survived thanks to her parents and the support they got. But the sad thing is that she was telling, and she appeared on the news, because she saved 3 young people from the party that was attacked by the Hamas terrorists. And she was saying that after the war, she was sure that something like this will not happen again. And on the 7th of October, when the Hamas terrorists came to kill old people, families, babies, only because they are Jews, she suddenly found herself back in that situation, found herself back in those dark times, and felt that she's being threatened only because she's Jewish. Unfortunately, we see a direct link between those days and today. And this terrorist attack of the Hamas and their slogan of "from the river to the sea" is aimed at one thing, it's very clear, and they don't hide it, at killing the people living in Israel, killing Jews, and destroying the state of Israel, the only Jewish state in the world. But what is more shocking is the response of many people that supported the Hamas. We saw demonstrations, massive demonstrations in Europe, in North America, and even in South Africa. And this is something that has to be condemned. The issue of the Hamas attack is not a political issue, it's a moral issue. And you cannot stand aside. This attack has to be condemned no matter what. And what is even more cynical is the usage of the convention, of the Genocide Convention, against Israel, against the people that were attacked, and trying to blame Israel for something that it has never done and could not do. I would like to wish you all a good evening, and I hope, sincerely hope, that such atrocities, such attacks will not happen again, but we cannot be sure. Thank you very much.
Dear Tallinnates in Johannesburg, dear Mary Kluk in Durban, dear Jakub Nowakowski in Cape Town, dear survivors, excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. The International Holocaust Remembrance Day was held in Germany for the first time in 1996. The then Federal President Roman Herzog said in his proclamation speech, and I quote, "The memory must not end. It must also remind future generations to be vigilant. It is therefore important to find a form of remembering now that will have an impact on the future. It should express sorrow for suffering and loss, be dedicated to the memory of the victims, and counteract any risk of repetition." End of quote. On 27th of January 1945, Red Army soldiers of the First Ukrainian Front liberated the survivors of the concentration camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the Nazi regime's largest concentration and extermination camp. With today's Remembrance Day, we remember the Holocaust and all the victims of these unprecedented crimes against humanity perpetrated by Nazi Germany. We particularly remember the unspeakable suffering of European Jews at the hand of the Nazis. These unbelievable atrocities committed by Nazi Germany had consequences that were felt worldwide. Some of those who managed to escape also went to South Africa. The Holocaust and Genocide Remembrance Centers in Durban, Johannesburg and Cape Town are testimony and evidence of this global impact. They were founded and are still largely supported by survivors of the Holocaust. At its head are Tali Nates, Mary Kluk and Jakub Nowakowski. I would like to thank them and all the employees of the 3 Holocaust and Genocide Centers for their dedicated work. The centers exist not only for Holocaust survivors and their descendants, but for all people, South Africans, guests of South Africa, and people worldwide. Because they should and they want to have an impact in the future and counteract any risk of repetition. We at the German Embassy in Pretoria will continue to support you to the best of our ability and out of deep conviction. Dear ladies and gentlemen, never before has there been such a cruel crime of extermination as that of the Holocaust. It is unique in its kind. Let us do everything we can to ensure that there's no repetition of any kind of genocide. We owe this to the victims we commemorate today, but also to our own descendants. Thank you.
We will now share a film that features South African survivors as well as second and third generation survivors talking to us about why it is important to remember.
It's very important, this ceremony and the existence today of all Holocaust Memorial, because it's a long time ago, and to young people that's history, that's nothing that they lived through, and they will never, nobody will understand or imagine how it was and what it was about. If you yourself weren't there, then you will never be able. But you can't live in the past. You must live in the future, and you must hope that a thing like the Holocaust will never happen, and that the young people learn about it. The main thing is the education. They must know what happened, and they must live not, we can't live in the past, because if you live in the past, you can't live with this. You have to make the best of the time and whatever you can, and remember the things that happened as it happened many times before, but not at a scale like this.
It is so important to commemorate Holocaust Remembrance Day because we need to keep the memory alive of those that perished during the terrible atrocities of the Holocaust. We need to tell the stories of those that perished to keep their memory alive. And we need to learn from the past in order not to repeat it. So if we commemorate and we remember, then we are constantly keeping the stories alive. We are remembering the past, trying not to repeat it, and learning from the mistakes of the past. For me, it's been incredibly important to tell the story of my grandfather's family that perished in the Holocaust, because they were wiped off the face of the earth and they need to be remembered. We've used their names to name our children. My mom is named after my grandfather's baby sister who perished when she was 3 years old. We carry their light with us in the world, and we remember what can happen when you hate so much.
I believe it's important to keep the flame of memory alive, because without it we are lost. My mother and her parents fled Poland when she was 4. They fled from Poland through Romania and ultimately to Palestine. My mother didn't regard herself as a survivor, a term that she believed should be solely for those who went through the camps. My grand-sister perished in Auschwitz, one of the Guernsey 6 deported from Guernsey. Every year, we as a community at Yom HaShoah say never again, and we dedicate ourselves to teach our children the evils of racism and the Holocaust. An International Holocaust Remembrance Day is more important. It's for the world to remember never again.
On my visit to Auschwitz in 2019, it healed a lot of wounds for me. It became a place where I could gain knowledge. It was a visual. It wasn't just this place where I only learned in textbooks. I had a barrack. I saw a barrack. I saw a cattle cart. I saw the road that my gran spoke about where she walked along. And it healed a lot of wounds for me, and it actually made me more passionate about the work I do today for 3G and now 4G and my daughter. So it was the best thing I could have done, is going to Auschwitz, seeing it with my own eyes, walking the road where my gran walked, even though I didn't take her journey, because her journey was via boat and then via train. But I stood where she stood, and I felt her there with me. So yeah, it healed a lot of wounds for me.
Look, when I'm standing here and looking around, the pictures that I'm seeing around are very harmful and painful. But I went to Auschwitz. When I went to Auschwitz in 2014, on the plane taking me to Auschwitz, I had a lot of stress. I was nervous, and I didn't expect my reaction to be like that. When I landed and started to walk, I actually felt almost nothing, because I realized, unfortunately, they were just buildings, and to me it represented a very big necropolis. That's all what it meant. One thing hit me when I was walking. Because I was the son of a survivor, the guide took me away from the group, took me to one of the barracks where the ladies were standing. And I was there in January, it was very cold. And I realized, how did they survive? Because the wind was coming through the floor, it wasn't wood, it was earth, what you call very, and I just kept on playing on my mind, how did they manage to survive? And then another thing that, I don't know if it was in my mind or was it something, I can't work it out, I really don't. When I saw the latrine, I realized that was the lowest of dignity, the lost. And I just smelled. I could smell foul smell. Was that my brain? Was that my imagination? Or was it from there? I actually blocked my nose and I walked out. These were the reactions. But afterwards, when I was walking to Auschwitz, I realized it was big. It lacked all this, of course, and I wasn't there, so I cannot say how I feel. Although 3 weeks later, I came up with a poem that was expressing the loneliness of that place. But I can't give you more because I wasn't in it. When I hear people, and even when I do tours of the Holocaust, of the Shoah, I do tours in roads speaking about that. At the end of the day, I'm still an outsider. I can't explain what it is being hungry. I can't explain what it is fear. I can't explain what it is becoming mad, being beaten, because we were not there. That's why my conclusion to Auschwitz, for me, it's a big, like I said, necropolis, because you walk through there and you know the soul of our people are probably still there, if it is, and they're there and they're probably saying, please walk on our footsteps and just don't forget us. That's all what I can say.
Don't think that it can't happen to you. You think that it can only happen to other people, other religions, other people, others, other types of people, people who aren't you. It can happen to you.
We will now have a discussion on the symbolism of Auschwitz. And if during this discussion you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We have an esteemed panel, Professor Adam Mendelsohn, who's the director of the Kaplan Centre for Jewish Studies at the University of Cape Town, Jakub Nowakowski, the director of the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Centre, and Iris Singer, an Austrian filmmaker and activist. I'll moderate the panel, but for those of you who would like to, I would like to encourage you to look in the chat for the full bios of our esteemed panel. In the interests of time and maximizing this conversation, I think it's practical that we put the bios in the chat and that we begin the conversation with these 3 esteemed panelists. Adam lives and works in Cape Town, as you know. Kuba has spent his life in Poland, but he's now at home in Cape Town. And Iris lives and works in Austria. And they will bring perspective from those 3 spaces and landscapes into their answers and discussion. I'm going to begin, if I may, and just ask the first question. And I think I'll ask you, Jakub, if you will answer the question first, and maybe we'll keep it just because it's online and it's easier if we can have Kuba, Adam, and then Iris to share with us in what ways has the global perception of Auschwitz shifted over the years, and how do historical, cultural, and political contexts influence this symbolism, focusing obviously on the 3 spaces and countries that you come from. And I think it's the beginnings of that conversation happened in the short film that we saw, the very poignant perceptions of this exact question from survivors and second and third generation. So if I might ask you, Kuba, to begin.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everybody for joining us during this very special day. It's an honor to be a part of this panel. I think it's inevitable that the symbolism of Auschwitz has changed and been changing and will change over the time. As with every new generation, we will be looking at Auschwitz, or people will be looking at Auschwitz through the background of their own backgrounds or emotions and experiences. But we mustn't forget that the story of Auschwitz actually starts as an actual tangible place built out of wood and bricks and mortar. And for me personally, because I'm coming from Poland, because I've been living in the shadow of Auschwitz, this is something that is very obvious, that above everything, Auschwitz is an actual place, existing place, a proof, an evidence of the crimes that have been committed 79 years ago in the middle of Europe. But Auschwitz started again as the actual place, liberated in January 27 by the Russian army. The Russian soldiers had no idea where they are coming from. That the goal of the Russian army was not at all to liberate the camps. These were liberated on the way toward the Berlin. And the soldiers, just like their American colleagues that were liberating camps in the West, were absolutely shocked with their findings, with the discovery of the bodies of the barracks and all the other horrible findings. But Auschwitz is the symbolism of Auschwitz at the very beginning. I mean, from very beginning, Auschwitz was in 1945, after liberation, Auschwitz was actually turned into a prison. As soon as the former Jewish, Polish prisoners were liberated, Auschwitz was used as a prison for German prisoners of war. And that continued over several months. And actually, it was the former prisoners, those that were liberated, that survived, that recognized the importance of Auschwitz as a proof, as a memorial. And these were those former prisoners that survived, who decided to fight to preserve Auschwitz. And actually, during the communist period, so between 1945 and 1989 in Poland, Auschwitz has been quite handy for this communist government as a tool to underline the fact that of the Nazi Western Germany guilt for the war, as a tool to attack the Western democratic Germany, and to show that Auschwitz, most of all, and this was this key narration of the communist government between 1940s, late 40s and late 80s, to present Auschwitz as a place of, most of all, of the suffering of the ethnic Poles. So if you'd go to Auschwitz in late 1950s or early 1960s, this is again the communist Poland, you would actually find very little information about the Jews, because the victims that were presented at that very time in the list of the victims that were presented at that very times in that particular space wouldn't include the Jews. Would list nationalities, so Russians, Russian prisoners of war, Poles, Dutch, French, Hungarians, and so on and so on. There would be no Jews listed in Auschwitz, of all the places. And again, we could talk about this for quite a time, but then things change. In the 1990s, Poland is becoming a democratic country, and then the narration changed. For the first time since the war, Holocaust is being introduced into the curriculum of Poland. This is, again, early 1990s. Poland, as a democratic country, recognized the importance of Auschwitz, and then Auschwitz is becoming a symbol of the destruction, the ultimate evil. This is where all the Jews been killed. So in a sense, Auschwitz is becoming a place where we go and commemorate the Jewish victims, because this is where, out of 1.1 million people killed in that very place, 1 million were Jews. But at the same time, Auschwitz is kind of overshadowing the simple fact that the Polish Jews were killed not only in Auschwitz. Actually, half of the victims of Auschwitz are Hungarian Jews. Auschwitz is overshadowing all the other places where Polish Jews been killed by the Germans, but also by their collaborators in other death camps, but also in the countryside, in the villages, in the forests, all over Eastern Europe. And so Auschwitz is the way how Poland and the Poles are perceiving Auschwitz is constantly changing. For the younger generations, there is a certain confusion. Their parents or grandparents would remember Auschwitz, again, as a place of the Polish suffering. While at schools today, they are being taught that this is a place of most of all of the Jewish suffering. Where's the true? And there are other issues, and Auschwitz is used as a tool also in the modern politics. Again, in the recent years, with the right-wing Polish government, once again, Auschwitz was used as a ultimate proof of a cruelty of the Germans. Yes, the Nazi Germans, but nevertheless, it was often brought up by the current politicians in their discussions with their German partners. And you shouldn't talk about democracy to us or about tolerance with us, because look what happened 70 years ago. Look at the place that your people built. So Auschwitz is constantly being in use, and unfortunately, less and less in this very purpose that we are meeting, to commemorate the victims, but more and more to gain very contemporary goals, far from commemoration.
Thank you, Kuba. Adam, would you share a little bit about your sense of the perception of Auschwitz and how it's shifted in South Africa?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. And to reiterate what Kuba said, what an honor it is to be part of this panel. So today, as Kuba has said as well, I mean, Auschwitz is familiar to us all. Even those in South Africa who know little or nothing about the Holocaust are familiar with the name Auschwitz. But it was not always so in South Africa. In South Africa, immediately after the Second World War, Auschwitz did not occupy a central place in popular memory and in broad understanding of the Holocaust. If anything, immediately after the war, Dachau and Bergen-Belsen were better known names because of the coverage in the South African press of the liberation of those camps by the British and by the Americans. Now, look, there were exceptions to this in the immediate post-war period. We know, for example, that Ahmed Kathrada, for example, visited Auschwitz in 1951 and then recalled that it made a deep and lasting impression on him. But this was unusual. For the most part, as I've suggested, broader awareness in South Africa of Auschwitz actually only came much later. It really came in the 1960s, in part because of the Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt, because of the publication of Elie Wiesel's book Night, which made such a deep impression globally, including here in South Africa. And the growing prominence of Auschwitz coincided then later, really in the 1970s and 1980s, with greater public awareness of the Holocaust itself, but also with particular episodes that attracted international attention. Again, there's less of a South African dimension than South Africa really watching a broader shift in how the Holocaust was reported, reflected on internationally. And as I said, none of these episodes specifically related to South Africa, but they received a lot of coverage here in South Africa. So, for example, the visits of Pope John Paul II to Auschwitz and the subsequent controversy around the display of crosses at Auschwitz. Later, the trial of Holocaust denier David Irving, which directed attention to Auschwitz, the impact of Schindler's List and other films and television programs that centered Auschwitz. All of these things ensured that that Auschwitz has become a metonym for the Holocaust in ways that Kuba has really referred to. Today, in South Africa, as elsewhere in the world, Auschwitz really dominates memory of the Holocaust. People who know nothing about the Holocaust have heard of Auschwitz. And it's become this metonym, rightly, obviously, become this metonym for pure evil, this representation of pure evil. But unlike in Poland, this local understanding here in South Africa of Auschwitz does not reflect a particularly South African engagement with and relationship with Auschwitz as a contested historical site in the way that Kuba has described. That, of course, has not stopped South Africans from instrumentalizing the idea of Auschwitz. That certainly we at the Kaplan Centre conducted a project over the last number of years looking at social media in particular. And what one of the striking features of this, and this is prior to October 7th, is how common invocations of genocide, of Hitler, of the Holocaust, and particularly of Auschwitz, were on social media in South Africa. So, and as I've written elsewhere, South Africans seem to have the Holocaust on their mind and invoke Auschwitz even when they know very little about it. And I've suggested, in fact, one of the reasons why there are so many invocations of the Holocaust is probably precisely because of this. Unfortunately, that people know so little that it's therefore so easy for them, unfortunately, to invoke it in ways which are often problematic.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you. Adam, if we can now ask Iris to share a little bit of the Austrian perspective.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be part of this panel discussion. I have to apologize for my voice. It's a bit scratchy, so I hope it's gonna keep up. Sorry for that. I think when we're looking at that, or when we're talking about Austria, about the Holocaust, we should have, or I can share their perspective or share about a bit of Austrian history and how Austria dealt or was dealing with the past in general. Because in Austria, there was a great silence for many, many years. So the re-establishment of the Republic of Austria in 1945 also remarked the birth of Austria's self-image as a first victim of National Socialism. So the professorial government described the Anschluss in March of 1938 as a military occupation by foreign power, and Austria as the first free country to fall victim to Hitler's aggression. So I have to repeat that Austria's self-image for many years was, we were the first victim of National Socialism. In 1986, debate in the presidential election campaign changed this view totally. There was a scandal around the presidential candidate and former General Secretary of the United Nations, Kurt Waldheim. He had hidden a very important part of his biography because he was a member of an NS organization. So when Waldheim was confronted with the suspicion that he had been involved in war crimes at the Balkan as a Wehrmachts officer, he defended himself and saying he had just fulfilled his duty as a soldier. So this statement suddenly made a big change of the official victim thesis visible. And then in 1991, the federal Austrian Chancellor, Mr. Franz Winnicki, gave a speech in the National Council in which he not only relativized this victim thesis, and because that had been upheld by officials until then. So we're talking about the year 1991. Austria as first victim of Nazi Germany. He also acknowledged the guilt of Austrians in the Second World War and in its consequences. So I think when we're talking about Auschwitz and about the Holocaust, we really have to see this long non-information, or very, very long not speaking about it. I just had a few days ago, a friend visited me and she was completely upset. She just came back from a family meeting and she said, like, Iris, you know, my cousin just told me my grandfather was at the SS. I'm 46 years old. Nobody in my family has ever talked about that. So there's so many things to talk about, or just like to work on it, because people are just like, they want to forget, or there was a generation of perpetrators. I think many of them didn't want to talk about their past or what happened. But I also want to share like some positive things. I think right now I can see it. I'm working a lot with schools, with students, with teachers. I'm going to talk about that a bit more later. And I really feel here there's so much work going on. So there's so many activities, workshop things. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and there was far too long silence.
Thank you, Iris. Going back to you, Kuba, what is the importance of Auschwitz and the Holocaust for young generations in South Africa, Austria, and Poland? But let's talk about Poland. When we ask you, please, Kuba, what is the importance of the Holocaust and obviously Auschwitz for young generation?
Thank you. But in Poland, this is something that we cannot really escape from because as it happens, we're living in this post-Holocaust space. Out of 6 million Jews that were killed during the Holocaust, most of them were actually killed in Eastern Europe. Many of them were killed in what today is Poland. So when you're traveling through Poland, and that's if many groups are going to Poland to go to Auschwitz or Bełżec or other places, and they have no idea that actually when they are traveling from the airport to their hotel or from the hotel to this place of Auschwitz, they are traveling through the places that are also filled with graves of the Polish Jews that were killed by the Germans during the war. So there's no escape. And again, for the younger generation, I think there is again a bit of confusion on especially on the story of Auschwitz. Who is the victims? Why it's important for us? Do we really need to learn about this 70 years later? How about our victims? These are some of those issues are again being underlined by the politicians. That is, there's too much of Auschwitz, that we should now focus on the ethnically Polish victims, that Auschwitz is overshadowing our own ethnically Polish suffering. So there's all those issues. But again, like Iris has mentioned, there are also positive things. And I think for more and more, especially younger Poles, Auschwitz is not a problem or a challenge, but more and more an obligation, in a sense, an obligation that is making them to look for ways to commemorate, to act. And again, what we've seen in Poland over the last 30 years, but especially over the last maybe 10, 15 years, is this huge involvement of the non-Jewish Poles in commemoration, of the Holocaust, in commemoration of their Jewish victims. And that's happening not only in places big and like cities like Krakow or Warsaw, but also in small tiny villages. And some of the key actors behind those programs, like Mr. Darek Popiela, who is a sportsman who's putting together a team who are of young people who are commemorating and renovating Jewish cemeteries. That's something that is happening. It's not to say that there is no anti-Semitism. It's not to say that there are no problems. But again, this is a surprising to see so many younger people involved in that. But again, there is also a problem. There is also a threat that Auschwitz will be used again as a primary symbol of the Holocaust, which can mean that on top of visiting Auschwitz once a year, we don't need to do anything else. We don't need to do anything more. We don't need to look at our hometowns and our villages and see perhaps there are, and certainly there are, sites of mass killing of the Jews that still needs to be renovated and remembered. So there are reasons for optimism, but there are also challenges, and these are very visible in Poland.
Fascinating. I recall the occasions that I've been on March of the Living. I've always been blown away by the vast volumes of young Polish students, young people who are there participating in the March of the Living in a very respectful and meaningful way. So it does speak to the positive aspect that there is interest and is availability to take on this commemoration and to remember.
You're right, and I think the March of the Living is a good example where actually Polish youth, and I've been especially as a student, I joined as a Polish representative few marches of the living, and it was a very peculiar experience for us to be there as a Poles a minority in this very Jewish program, and we've been also looked at by the Jewish participants with a bit of suspicion. What it is that you're doing here, what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you want to prove. It took some time for those students to understand that we are there to be them to be there with them, to commemorate, and there is no hidden agenda. Yes.
Interesting. Adam, in South Africa?
So I think that Kuba and Iris have referred very usefully to this sense of challenge and opportunity. I think that that's a useful way of thinking about the situation in South Africa. In South Africa, we have a very youthful population. That the median average age is 26. So it's a very young population, and most have now born and grown up in South Africa after apartheid. And certainly they have gone to schools where the Holocaust is part of the curriculum. So there is some exposure to the Holocaust through that. But at the same time, I think that beyond exceptional cases, so certainly particular schools and certainly Jewish schools and other schools, in many cases, there's, I think, very little familiarity with the specifics of the Holocaust or with Auschwitz. And again, this is something where particularly the work of the Holocaust centers in Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg does very, very important work, is supporting schools and providing sort of real in-depth encounters for students with the Holocaust through education, through visiting the centers. But at the same time, so there's despite all this work, there's plenty of evidence that of the use of the Holocaust and Auschwitz by certainly on social media by young people as rhetorical tools. That's as I've already described to you on social media in South Africa, social media is awash with references to the Holocaust, to genocide, and this has been a phenomenon for now many years. And I think that this presents a challenge and an opportunity. The opportunity, I think, comes from the fact that there is clearly curiosity about Auschwitz and the Holocaust. And I think that these references and this invocation, even though it's often very superficial and it's often point scoring, that this does point to and it provides some indication that there's an entry point here for people, a way to reach people, to speak to people about this, that it clearly resonates in the present, even if it's people are often using it and invoking it in ignorant ways. I think this suggests that there's opportunity and really supports the work that the Holocaust centers already do so successfully to provide these points of resonance and real depth, adding depth to conversations, to use the Holocaust and some of the lessons from the Holocaust to talk about things which resonate with South Africans, talk about racism, talk about xenophobia, other forms of hatred in South Africa, to use the lessons of the Holocaust for good. So that's to me, is the opportunity, that the fact that, in a way, South Africans have the Holocaust on the mind, on their minds, suggests that there's a way of reaching people and actually providing true depth to discussion, to use this as an entry point to really engage with what the Holocaust was, as opposed to the superficial and caricatured version that I think often dominates. But the challenge is also that this curiosity about Auschwitz and about the Holocaust is rooted in ignorance in many cases. And I think that people, the vast majority of the public, and particularly young people, know very, very little about the Holocaust beyond, again, the name Auschwitz and knowing that this is the epitome of evil. So, despite invoking the Holocaust, South Africans actually, I think, for the most part, know very little about it, which can lead to what we've seen, which is distortion and simplification and this rush to make analogies which are problematic. So I think, again, to echo Kuba and Iris, there's opportunity and challenge here. And certainly, again, to me, reminds me of this, how important this work, therefore, is, and how important the work of the Holocaust centers, therefore, is in this moment where there's opportunity, but also challenge when it comes to memory of the Holocaust.
Thanks, Adam. You couldn't, I couldn't have said it better. The work of the Holocaust and Genocide centers is more urgent than ever. And you're absolutely right that we've had, regrettably, many opportunities where symbolism, etc., has been used inappropriately, most of the time out of ignorance or at worst insensitivity. And we've always used those as a learning opportunity. We need to. The learning opportunity is what we need to grab hold of so that we can, and we do, provide that engagement with young people to unpack, as you said earlier in your previous answer, the issue around us and them and what can happen when we, it doesn't start with gas chambers. It begins with how we speak to one another. And particularly relevant in our country for us now is, how do we build the country we dream of? It's about how we speak to one another every day. And that's the work we're doing with young people, which is so important. Iris, tell us a little bit about the youth in Austria and your work.
I said before, there are also positive examples, and Cuba already mentioned the March of the Living. I have the great honor to be one of the co-organizers of the organization MORA. MORA stands for March of Remembrance and Hope Austria. March of Remembrance and Hope Austria is organizing every year a 3-day memorial trip. For this year, or the last few years, we've been 1,000 mostly non-Jewish Austrian pupils in the age about 17 years who are participating also at the March of the Living. So we're organizing this trip. We are going to the Museum Auschwitz. We are participating at the March of the Living. We are organizing a talk with a survivor. And the organization MORA, we started 16 or 18 years ago. We started with I think 100 students, 150, just a few schools with, really teachers that wanted to do something. And we were growing and growing and growing. And I think 1,000 pupils from all over Austria, they want to take part of that. They want to learn about it. And of course, it's also, that's the 3rd or 4th generation. They are the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren, or many of them, of perpetrators. And they are going there, and I think it also takes big courage from them to confront themselves. As who am I going there? And as who am I coming back? And what we are getting from feedbacks from teachers or also from students is that this trip, that the MORA trip, it changes their perspective of the students. So I just said before, they are 17 years old, or some of them maybe 18. One of the teachers told us that parents from her class or from her students came to her and said, my child has changed after that. My child has grown up a bit more. And how much they have been grown up, there's just another example I would really like to share, because this makes me very, very proud, because I know the students who organized that. So we had in 2019, there was the exhibition, The Lest We Forget. It was a photo exhibition where portraits of survivors were printed on 1 meter high portraits. And this exhibition was traveling all around the world. So it was in Washington, it was in the Ukraine, it was in Mexico, it was really everywhere. So, and everywhere, everything went fine because it's an outdoor exhibition. And this exhibition came to Vienna and was also outdoor. There's a street in Vienna called the Ring. So the portraits were presented there. And after, I think 2 or 3 days, The pictures were defected with knives and vandalized with national socialist symbols and slogans. So what happened then was many people like stood up and got active, and they stayed overnight there. They were watching that. They sort of also tried to sue the pictures. And we are having with Mora, with March of Remembrance, I hope, after this 3-day trip, after coming back from March of the Living, coming back from Auschwitz, coming back from Poland, a few weeks later, we are organizing like a closing event where we're inviting all our students to come together and sort of like, you know, like also to set a sign, like 1,000 people, 1,000 students, all of you have set a sign and have stood up and are aware of what has happened. And so there we had, and also in that year, 2019, we also, or I'm also a film producer, we produced a film called Facing Auschwitz. In this film, we accompanied 4 students on their memorial trip to Poland, so on their Mora trip. And you know, like the shooting was actually closed, everything was done. And I just had a WhatsApp group with those 4 students. And there was this happened, this scandal has happened, this vandalisms with the portraits happened. And I just sent to our 4 film protagonists just like an article. And a few hours later, I'm getting a phone call from one of them, Alina. And she said like, yeah, it is okay. She read that and she's not sure what, but she wants to do something. And she wants to do that at the closing event. And she really wants to become active and set a sign. So I said, as Mora organizer, I said, of course, you're going to get any support you need from me. As a film producer, I would like to take that on camera, what you're doing. So what happened is that our 4 Mora participants, but also 4 Facing Auschwitz protagonists, they took the microphone and they asked all the people that were there to walk over, like it was a distance from, I don't know, about 5 to 10 minutes to walk from there where we were, where we had our closing event, to where the portraits were. And he said, like, come on, everybody, just like walk there, because we have a small box with us with red hearts. And we call it 111 hearts as a sign of respect. And they just asked everybody to go there, to take a heart and to like tie this heart next to the portraits. There was a fence next to it. And what that shows, or like, I think this whole action shows how important civil courage is. And this is also what the 4 students said, like they said, like before the Mora trip, if they would have heard something like that happen, they just told me, of course they would have felt touched and they would have said like, oh my God, it's terrible and so on, but they would have not become active. And they just said like, but after being on the Mora trip, after walking the March of the Living, after seeing the Museum Auschwitz, I can't not do nothing anymore. I just have to become active and do something. And I think especially this project shows something can be so sort of very little, like just, you know, a red heart, a red paper heart, and putting a message on it and putting it there. But it has such a really, really big effect. So I think this is one of the really positive examples, after I mentioned the beginning of so many years of silence or of not confronting history. Now there's a big, like, many students, or there's like many teachers that are very active, and yeah, so I'm looking quite positive in the future if like more students, or if the students keep on doing works like that.
A really heartwarming story, and how much more so for you, having experienced the trip with them. And it's about building activists, and it doesn't have to be, you know, crazy forms of activism that put oneself in danger. Just to be able to say, I care, I feel, and I want to show solidarity with something that I don't approve of, or I don't think it's helpful. So I think it was a lovely story on a positive note. So it appears, obviously, that the politicization, as we've already heard to some extent in your previous answers, The politicization of Auschwitz and, in a broader context, the Holocaust, has significantly increased in recent years. What are some examples of this trend, and what factors contribute to its rise? Kuba, do you want to have a start?
Thank you. Well, yes, and I mean, it's the politicization of Auschwitz is one problem, but just recently with the visit of Mr. Elon Musk to Auschwitz, I'm not sure if you all know, he was earlier this week visiting Auschwitz. I think there is also another challenge, which is monetization of Auschwitz, in a sense, treating Auschwitz as a tool for promotion. As in many ways, this is what happened with Elon Musk actually being there to learn, and that's always terribly important. But also just using it as a vehicle to promote his businesses. And that's not only Elon Musk. Over the last years, we've seen Auschwitz being used in a number of publications, books, which are having Auschwitz in their title, but has nothing to do with actual stories of the victims or perpetrators. They're just using the name that people recognize all over the world to bring in attention. And then they take us at this story of love or hate, or revenge. That has nothing to do with reality. And we've seen it in the books. We've seen that in the movies. The Hunters movie or series in one of the TVs is doing precisely that, using Auschwitz as a tool to bring our attention and then take us into the journey of revenge and bloodshed and so on and so on. But yes, politicians are also understanding very well that Auschwitz is a name that we will respond to. If someone shouts Treblinka, well, not really. If someone shouts genocide of in Rwanda, that is yes, bringing attention because of the shock of the world. But if someone shows Namibia or Auschwitz became part of the pop culture. And again, politicians are fully aware of that. And then that's visible in Poland. Yes, and again, that Auschwitz has been used as a tool to remind the Germans their eternal responsibility, despite the fact that the Germans are fully aware of that burden. And over those last, whatever it is, 15 years, I've seen a number of politicians, German politicians, from the presidents to prime ministers to diplomats, and never I've heard them shying away from their responsibility for what has happened. But yes, Auschwitz is a tool, and it's being used, and the Holocaust is being used as a tool in the discussions to attack the enemy. And again, it's sometimes, I mean, rarely in Polish politics, at least, it's rarely actually to attack the Jews or Israel, but in many cases, it is attack other politicians of being pro-Jewish or too much pro-Jewish, too much pro-Israeli. But again, it's not only Polish politics, it's not only German politics, it's not only Elon Musk, it is Vladimir Putin, who is actually denazifying Ukraine as we speak. School after school and village after village. It's bringing up Auschwitz and the Holocaust as a reason for his invasion on Ukraine, which is obviously absolutely false. So yes,
as you said, sorry, as you say,
no,
it's not an exclusively Polish scenario.
Absolutely.
Adam, in terms of South Africa and your point about Auschwitz not being in the public domain in terms of knowledge, other than a word that's to be bandied about, often with misused.
I think that's Kuba's point is well taken. That there's an interesting paradox here, that an increasing presence and prominence of the Holocaust and of Auschwitz, particularly in popular culture, means that it is at least superficially familiar to people. At a superficial level, it's something people have heard of. They might have seen a television program. They might have, perhaps read a book or otherwise, which is referred to Auschwitz and to the Holocaust. But I think to many people, it still means very little. That it really is this sort of superficial signifier. And I've really suggested to us earlier that I think arguably in South Africa, it's precisely because, unfortunately, it means that there is so little real knowledge of the Holocaust in the wider society that it is used so freely, that it's again, there are no consequences to doing so, that this is very different from a situation or a country where, like even the United States or certainly Germany or Poland or even England, places where there is where memory of the Second World War is central to how the society thinks about itself. And that in South Africa, I think there's, other than perhaps the superficial discussion of the Holocaust, it's not as if that we're a society which is engaged much with the Second World War, engaged much with that particular past. So that, again, this paradox of superficial familiarity and often historical ignorance. And I've suggested already that this is a particular problem. We've seen it particularly on social media, that there's sort of these invocations, frequent invocations of genocide, Hitler, and the Holocaust on social media in South Africa. But I think unfortunately, over the last number of months, this has seeped out into from the online world into public life in South Africa, that the frequency of these invocations of the Holocaust and of Auschwitz, and again, without, I think, due reflection, without really knowing or thinking about what this means. What does it mean to invoke the Holocaust or to invoke Auschwitz? And I think that in some cases, these invocations are clearly meant to insult and to hurt Jews and to diminish the Holocaust. I think that in some cases there is a malign intent behind these invocations. And I think in other cases, these invocations of the Holocaust and of Auschwitz are meant in good faith. They are meant as a call to action, again, a reference to something which is understood to be the epitome of evil. But I think the common denominator here is that these invocations are in public life in South Africa are often simplistic and tell us very little about Auschwitz and often reflect real ignorance about the Holocaust and about Auschwitz. They tell us much more unfortunately, about the present than they do about the past. And they tell us much more about a lack of engagement with the past than anything else.
Thank you, Adam. Iris, do you want to add something in terms of Austria?
Yes, I would like to stay with two positive examples. On the one hand, we had just 2 days ago, last Friday, there was a very big demonstration in Vienna, or actually in whole Austria. It was on Friday, 26th of January. And there was a demonstration against right and for saving the democracy. And we had in Vienna, the organizers said we were about 80,000 people only in Vienna, and these demonstrations have been all over Austria. So I think this is a positive example of how people are feeling, or it was getting involved or being aware in general what is happening. Another example I would like to add, another positive example I would like to add, is about civil courage and the point or the thing about civil courage. In 2021, I launched a project called Raise Your Voice, Show Civil Courage. And I said before, I'm working a lot with students and with teachers. And the idea was to ask students to write short stories about civil courage in context of anti-Semitism, racism, and homophobia. And we told the students, those can be real stories, things that have happened in their life or in a friend's life, things they have seen, or maybe things they have also or just totally stories that come up to their mind. We also, or students who were taking part of the project had been in the year before participating at the March of the Living. So we asked them just write short stories, 1 to 2 pages, and just the only important thing is somebody in the story has to show civil courage. That's the important thing. And the whole project was inspired by the White House Among the Nations. So the young people deal with that topic. And in the first year, we got more than 50 stories. And what we did with the stories, or what the thing, or what the project Raise Your Voice is, we take those stories and we write them into screenplays, and then we produce short movies. And our thing is, we don't want to change that stories, change their perspective of the students, of what they see or what they feel too much. We just want to, or trying to leave the story how they have been writing it. And these films, now in the last 2 years, we produced 8 short movies that are completely different, all of them. And these films are sent to schools in cooperation with the EO Youth Cinema. So yeah, I think this is another positive example of like how you can work with the project or work with the topic and create awareness, and also like getting the feedback from the students. It's like I said before, they're like, now they understand also a little bit more, or after going to Poland, after going to Auschwitz, but also after being part of the project Raise Your Voice, getting more into the whole topic of civic courage. They now understand more, well, okay, what is going on now in the world? What is happening around me? What do I have to be aware of? When do I have to stand up against, I don't know, politics, but also stand-ups in everyday life situations.
Wonderful, wonderful concept. Find your voice. That's what we all need to do. In terms of politicization of the Holocaust in Auschwitz, I just want to say, and it refers largely to a lot of the curiosity and the emotion in the chat, that today is not a time, and this commemoration is not the place for politics, or to express our respective views or opinions on present-day global developments. Today is a time, and this commemoration is the place for remembrance, for not allowing the ghosts of our past to fade away from us. And with that, I'd like to ask the panelists each for one short sentence, and I'm sorry, it's just in the interest of time. Your answers have been so full and so informative, but I'd just like to ask you about the future of remembrance. If I could ask you each to give one short sentence, starting with you, Kuba, on the future of remembrance.
Thank you, Mary. And that's perhaps the toughest of all questions that have been brought up to today, because we're in this very, very special moment in the history in which we still have around us people that can say, I remember, I've been there. Soon they'll be gone, and then we will not be able to remember anymore. In the same way, we don't remember ancient Rome. We know about ancient Rome. We learn about ancient Rome, but we cannot remember that. So how do we transfer memory into knowledge? How do we transfer memory into obligation for a positive change? How do we change this memory into something that will be important for all of us, despite, yes, we are far away from those places and those times. And that's certainly the challenge. But again, Auschwitz, coming back to the very beginning of this entire program, Auschwitz is a place that is telling us a lot about the Germans. It tells us a lot about the victims, but most of all, it tells us a lot about us. And that's the universal lesson of Auschwitz. It tells us about what humans are capable of doing if the time is right or wrong. How far can we go under certain circumstances? That's the universal lesson of Auschwitz. And I think that is the challenge for us in the business of Holocaust education. We'll be looking for answers, certainly.
Thank you, Kuba. Adam, can you give us your thoughts briefly on the future of remembrance?
Absolutely. So, I think Kuba has pointed to some of the challenges again, which is that we are living in a moment when the number of eyewitnesses who are able to bridge the past and the present are diminishing, and unfortunately we can imagine a world where there won't be eyewitnesses, and falls entirely to us to carry out the work of teaching the importance of the Holocaust. And I think that, to really reiterate what I said earlier, I think that this remembrance is urgent, and for all sorts of reasons. It's urgent because it's a mechanism, a means to honor those who died, and to honor them in a small way that we can. But also beyond that, there is tremendous value and social value in remembering as well, and particularly here in South Africa, that the Holocaust offers us a more complicated way of understanding, for example, racism, something of great importance in South African society. It really challenges a South African way of thinking about race. Whenever we take students to Poland and Germany, it really doesn't compute in a South African sense, and I think that's very important to force people to think in more sophisticated ways about the dangers of racism, the dangers of othering, the dangers of accepting public violence, the importance of constitutional democracy. And I think that the Holocaust memory allows us to do these things. That it really presents a mechanism to better our society, and to force our society to really to warn our society about the failure and to tackle problems which we see around us. So I think it's given, unfortunately, the nature of the problems and challenges that South Africa faces, I think that there's urgency here, and the Holocaust Centre certainly have an essential role in South Africa going forward.
Thank you, Adam. Iris?
Keep on talking about it. This is what one survivor who's very special to me, Mr. Marco Feingold, he died a few years ago in the age of 106 years. And he accompanied Morin, or he came with us as a survivor for many years. And then he talked to our students. He was giving a speech. And I just remember there were also the students had the possibility to ask him questions. And the question quite often came like, so, but Mr. Feingold, you survived 4 concentration camps. What's your message to us? What's your message to the youth? How can we, what can we do? How we can that never happen again? And Mr. Feingold said, like, be aware what's going on in the world and be interested and don't look away. And I think, or I hope that this is a very big part of the future. This is what I want to give, like, to all the people or the students I'm working with, like, be active, show civil courage, and don't look away. And as I said in the beginning, keep on talking about it. Thank you.
It was such a profound thing you said there, Iris. My late mother was a teenage refugee to South Africa from Germany, and she drummed into us from a young age, look at the world with open eyes. And I think that's what you were trying to say.
That's it.
I would like to quote from Elie Wiesel as we close off on this topic of remembrance and remembering. And Elie Wiesel said, "Let us remember those who suffered and perished then, those who fell with weapons in their hands, and those who died with prayers on their lips, all those who have no tombs. Our heart remains their cemetery." But is there hope? Is there hope in memory? There must be. Without hope, memory would be morbid and sterile. Without memory, hope would be empty of meaning, and above all, empty of gratitude. Close quote.